Hello, and welcome to the Dissident Mama podcast, number 26. Today, our guest is Laura Blodgett. She is a homeschooling veteran of 7 children, 7 children, many years, 7 children. Blodgett is the creator of the Happy Homeschool blog and podcast. My goal is to inspire and equip you to create a learning environment that makes home everyone's favorite place, she says. I think that happens most easily and with the most satisfying results when the parent-child relationship is nurtured. As if she's not busy enough being a home education blogger and podcaster, wife, mom, grandmother, and homesteader, Blodgett also has 3 other blogs: Daily Improvisations, Fun Fitness After 50, and Fun Learning Chinese. Hello, Laura. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
As I'm starting to talk to you, I realized I had a cough drop in my mouth, so that threw me off. Sorry. And that's why I said you had been doing this for 7 years instead of 7 children. So before we get into all your fascinating projects, we'll have you explain that you have been doing this for many years, and we're just going to find out a little bit about you. How many kids do you have? What are their ages now?
We have 7 children, and their ages range from 36 to 24. I had to do the math. Looked up. I know their birth ages by heart, and I know their names most of the time. They laugh. I did the math for their ages. So yeah, their ages. The oldest is 36, going to be 37 soon, and the youngest is 24.
Okay, and where do you live? Not your exact zip code. You don't have to give that out, please.
I live on the beautiful Snake River in Idaho.
Nice. Are you an Idaho native?
I am not. I was born in Santa Monica, California, was transplanted to the Portland area of Oregon for most of my school years, graduated from high school there. And then Greg and I moved to Idaho when our first kids were little because we thought it was going to be a nicer place to raise children than Los Angeles.
And I assume since you've been there raising your children all these years and now your grandchildren that turned out to be a good move, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
I've never been to Idaho. It's one of the, it's on the short list of states that I haven't been to, but I've heard only lovely things about it. How would you describe yourself? This can be just your personality day to day or as a home educator, mother. Just how would you, what type of person are you?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a Jesus lover. That is the core of my being and doing. And then layered on that, I am a happily married, nearly 60-year-old woman who likes to be fully engaged in life. And I'm constantly working on a remix of enjoying the things I've enjoyed for a long time, like gardening and sewing and playing my flute, with things that I get interested in learning now, like learning to ride a horse the last couple of years, learning Chinese for a few years, and took up barefoot running about 10 years ago.
Wow. So, which leads to all your blogs because you want to talk to the world about these things. But let's target on homeschooling at first. Now, some of these are the same questions you asked me when I was a guest on your show. So I never miss an opportunity to ride on a smart person's coattails. So I stole these from you. I admit it. When and why did you decide to homeschool?
Well, it was actually just a strange quirk. My husband happened to be listening to a talk show radio, and then we were in the car one day and he told me about that. And he said, "What do you think about homeschooling?" Our oldest was about 4 at the time. And I thought about it for a minute and I thought, I could do that.
And this circa what year? This is what 90s, late 80s?
That would have been the late 80s, right before we moved to Idaho. We were still down in California at that time.
Had you ever heard of this thing?
I had not.
Okay. So that's really interesting. What was your reaction when your husband told you about this?
I just stopped and thought about it for a minute because it seemed like a wise thing to do before you give an answer of that magnitude, and thought briefly about being a parent and teaching my own kids, and thought that was something I could pursue. I didn't see any reason why I couldn't do that.
Nice. It's one of those things too. I always try to encourage people, give it a try. And if it's not for you, you don't have to keep doing it in perpetuity, but why not give it a shot? So what were some of these things? What did you wish you had known when you started or early on, and what you might have done differently?
I think one of the main things early on is that I wouldn't have spent so much on boxed curriculum. Coming from an institutional school setting, I sort of thought you had to have that to teach from. It really only took a couple of years to realize that most of that was wasted paper and of minimal use when it came to knowledge. I mean, at least it taught them to read, but it was tended to be dry and boring and incomplete, if to put it politely. And I think one of my biggest concerns was starting once I got into it, you're thinking, okay, well, I have to be able to give my kids all the answers. I have to know things so that I can teach them. And that I had to learn to let go of that and learn that I could be a responsible, in charge parent and give them the parenting they needed, but still freely admit, okay, let's learn this together. I don't know everything.
Yes. I think that took me a long time to do, to figure out that thing. You just can't have the answers to everything. No person on
No.
earth can. But when you slap that homeschool label on you, a lot of newbies want to pretend they know everything. And I think it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing to admit, gosh, I have no idea about this thing, kiddo. Let's figure it out together.
Yeah.
So how did your approach to homeschooling mature? You talked about kind of letting go, going from the box curriculum to maybe trusting yourself more, learning along with your kids. But was there anything else you kind of had to figure out along your way as far as doing, and then also your overall philosophy? Did that kind of change?
I think I had some really good guidance in the beginning from, I don't know, I just happened upon the right books and the right speakers talking about your priorities, thinking, why are you doing this? And if this is important to do, then what's the most important to do first?
Right.
And so from the beginning, I had a pretty strong idea of the basics of what I wanted to do, not necessarily how I was going to do it, but for instance, wanting to teach them core values based on truth, help them to really develop why they could or should know certain things, and to be able to discuss that and to be able to think clearly when different information was presented to them, to not be lost because somebody said something a certain way, and to be able to think around what was being said. Teaching them to be responsible, and also teaching them to get along. The idea that siblings need to be in conflict all the time was not something I was willing to go with.
I'll need to find out all about that. You've written about that some, but yeah. Well, would you say that all your kids today get along pretty well generally? And then that is maybe part of the education, or maybe it's the part of the way y'all are made. Maybe it's nature and nurture. What do you think? Is this something that kids can actually be taught to do, to get
That's a
along?
leading question. I have no hesitation in saying that my children are all great friends
Mhm.
and enjoy each other immensely, are constantly in contact and encouraging each other. And I think it's very doable when you provide the incentives and the examples of how to treat other people, both how you treat your spouse, how you treat people around you, how you're problem solving any conflict in relationships that you have in your own. Then they mirror that and they learn to respect those relationships rather than, oh, I have to be right, oh, I'm mad.
Right. And what particular or any unexpected challenges did you face along the way? Was there anything that made you think, maybe we need to take a year off, or, uh, wow, I made a horrible mistake?
Well, I think everybody has those moments where it's just really hard, especially when you've got little kids. But all along the way, I would have moments where I would think, I'm working hard here, or I'm trying to problem solve or whatever. But it would usually only take a few seconds, a few minutes for me to review my priorities
Mm-hmm.
and what was at stake and what the options had to offer, and to come back to my original choice and go, okay, so this is what I want to do. Since I'm frustrated, since there's stress that I'm feeling, is there something I need to adjust? Because I think that's really key in evaluating problems is, what do I need to adjust, instead of, oh, I just need to give up.
I think that's a great way to put it. Continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's all right. I remember the first time when the kids were little and I was kind of floundering, and I don't remember exactly why. It wasn't anything crucial that year. Um, I may have only had 5 kids at the time, but I reached a point, early spring, March or so, where I thought, I just need to evaluate. I just need to stop and I need to evaluate, which is really hard for me. You talk about things you learn, because I am a very goal-oriented person. But I made myself do it because I decided it was the best thing. And the lessons that I learned from that were just astonishing, because I saw the kids learn things in whole different ways that I had expected, because we didn't stop being a family. We didn't stop interacting, and we didn't stop doing basic things like doing chores in the morning or having our reading time together. There were some very basic things that I continued practically from day one until the last one graduated from high school. And one of those was lunchtime reading together and discussing, but just letting go of everything else. And it just taught me how creative I could be with the teaching process and meeting their needs and seeing what they could do with opportunity.
Yeah, you brought up a couple things that made me think about something I tell to people when they're thinking about homeschooling or they're doing it and they're feeling burnout. I kind of say we're in
Mhm.
the trenches,
Mhm.
because it is. I mean, there's spiritual warfare going on all around us, but you get burnout. You do feel like you're fighting a battle sometimes with your children. But
Mhm.
when you step back and you get out of the trenches and you look at, the beautiful accomplishments that you take for granted. Oh, I taught my children to read, instead of saying that, wow, you gave somebody the gift of literacy. Like, that's a really huge deal.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. I find that I have to do that still a lot, because I'm still homeschooling 3 kids. And then what you were saying about getting along and problem solving, that's something they're going to be doing as they become more independent homeschoolers. That's just, again, that's something we just think, oh, the maturing as people. But when you see them doing that in their own education, it's really beautiful. So,
Yes.
uh, being that you have children that get along, this is wonderful. So my next question is, what unexpected or enjoyable results did you have as far as being a home educator? That whole problem solving, unity thing is wonderful. What else can you think of besides that? Something maybe you didn't even expect.
Well, it's funny because frequently it's the unexpected hardships that bring out the beauty in things.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a daughter go through terminal cancer, went from her age to 12 to 14, basically, and she died just shy of her 14th birthday.
Oh my.
And the the sorrow and the hardship of all that was obviously immense. But seeing my children, who were a range of ages, she was in the middle. So I had older children take responsibility in different sorts of ways, and I had younger children just step up, being part of the family, not maybe being as childish as maybe they would have felt like they could slip into as easy, because they saw that I was giving everything I had based on the situation. Um, so again, letting the hardships turn into beautiful things.
Wow. That I'm sorry, I didn't know about that. That is heart-wrenching. Um, is this something that you discussed with your I mean, it's happening in front of them, but how, do you mind me asking, how did you
No.
handle that with somebody who, you know, when young children die, that's heartbreaking, but, you know, sometimes it just happens to little babies. And I think people even understand that more than they would, you know, a child 12 to 14 years old. Uh, how did you handle that with your children? And were you a Christian at the time?
Yes, I've been a Christian since I was 4 years old.
Okay.
Not that I haven't matured along the way, but that's when the journey started. And it's interesting. Again, God prepares you in strange ways for things when you don't know. And I'm a nurse. I'm an RN. I graduated with a bachelor's from UCLA. And when I was going through my pediatric rotation, my professor gave us a list of options to do a research paper on. And one of the things she had on there was death and children. Well, I took it to mean teaching children about death. And so I did my whole paper on that. And she got it, and then she's handing it back to me, and she's looking at me with this strange look. She goes, I've never had anybody translate it that way. I've never had anybody look at that. It was always about how do you help children who are dying, or how do you deal with the fact that children are dying? And so I was prepared. I'm sorry. Without knowing what I needed to be prepared for on many levels. And so I also had the mindset of, we started every morning with reading the Bible, because one of my main philosophies is, if you want to teach kids about life, read them the Bible. It's all in there. So whereas on one hand, I was careful about the level at which I might shock younger kids, if you will, you know. But really, I found that not a problem with reading the Bible. That's more a problem with current events and things that maybe they should have their innocence protected from in day-to-day living. But when it came to reading the Bible, so they're cognizant of the fact that people die, that there's illness, and that there's all of that stuff. So when it happened, when she got sick and all of that was happening, they were prepared.
Wow. And you've written so much, and I've read quite a bit of your stuff, followed you off and on since I became friends with you on a Facebook group so long ago that probably doesn't even exist anymore. But do you write about this on your website about how to deal with death?
I did do in the series that you were going to ask about later, the 52 weeks to a better relationship with your child. I did do one episode on that.
Okay.
But about 10 years after Melody passed, that is when I decided I wanted to write the book Melody's Life Savings, which is a short story, because I think it's only about 80 pages, that talks about that journey.
Okay. And we'll get to that in a bit, because that's an audiobook, right?
I recorded it, and it's also a Kindle, and you can order it print on demand.
Okay, I will definitely link to all that, and we'll discuss that in a sec. Well, what are your goals with the Happy Homeschool website? That would be your main blog, would you say?
Well, I started blogging sort of incidentally when we went on a short living trip to Taiwan, because I wasn't going to write 25 letters a day to people who wanted to know. But then when I got back, I started my all-inclusive blog, Daily Improvisations. And then after a few years, I split off. Excuse me, I think I need a sip of water too.
Yes, and you can get to everything through all the websites. They're all linked together.
I've tried.
Yeah. It's pretty easy to navigate. I didn't realize at first when I started really researching you that you made it really easy. I kept thinking it was going to be all disparate and separate, but you've done a great job. I just wasn't expecting it to be so fluid. It was nice.
Thank you. Well, I've had a lot of technical assistance from my oldest daughter and her husband, who are really the ones who encouraged me in the blogging and writing technical aspects of it.
Nice.
So I started, when I first split off the blogs. I did a Happy Libertarian, and I enjoyed that, but I found that so much of what I was writing was the Happy Homeschool. And I was just trying so hard not to act like I had all the answers. But then this oldest son-in-law really encouraged me. He said, "Mom, you know how to do this. You need to share."
Right.
And so I started this, and he was right. It just is the perfect fit for me. I want to encourage people that they can do this, that it makes sense, and that when they are discouraged or when they're problem solving, there are ways to look at things that will help them do that effectively.
Yes, let's go into your series, 52 Weeks to a Better Relationship with Your Child. Some of the topics are how your attitude toward religion affects your child, how to be your child's preferred friendship coach, helping children set good personal goals, and how your attitude toward other people affects your child. You're not quite to 52 yet. Are you going to get to the end of that? Because I've read quite a few of those, and I mean, your writing's very forthright and honest, and I would love to see you finish that. Is that the goal in 2021?
Yeah, it was a two-pronged problem. Again, I hate to be a sob story, but 2 years ago, my younger sister died unexpectedly when I was in the middle of this, and it just kind of threw me for a loop emotionally. And I think I was in the 30s at that point. And then I got started again, and then the podcast host that I was using really messed up my whole series. And so I had to switch to a new host and start re-recording everything.
Ugh.
So I'm halfway through re-recording, and then we ended up moving a year ago, and then we just moved again. And so that's kind of screwed up my schedule.
Yes. And then you have daughters having babies and stuff, which is why it took me so long to get you on my show. You just are living life. There's just always something happening.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not
Well,
bored.
yeah. Yes. Never a dull moment. As far as that series goes, what kind of input have you gotten? Because they are quite personal, but, just brimming with wisdom at the same time, too.
Oh, well, the people that have read them have said, thank you very much. And I've seen evidence of them applying things very effectively, which is very gratifying. And then I've had others quote me to other people. And so it's fun to see it come around, to see it passed on. I have had a few people very specifically ask me questions, which has generated a number of those. And that's always fun to be able to feel like I'm addressing a very specific need that someone has.
If somebody read these and had a question for you, can they contact you through the website? Is that
Yeah,
the best way to do it? Okay.
I have contacts set up through there. And if they have an issue regarding their parent-child relationship they'd like to ask me, I think it's great because I write about it without telling people who they are or what their problem is.
Right. Now, one of your last couple of essays, well, before Christmas, I've been kind of taking a break over December, but one of them from the fall was, does technology destroy your children's creativity? That was recent, wasn't it?
I don't remember
Oh.
exactly. I think it was re-recorded recently.
Well, I read it recently. If it
Okay.
wasn't recent, it sounded like, it's an evergreen issue, but that one really spoke to me because that's such a divisive issue. It's one or the other. And you just had a very even-handed and logical, very balanced approach to it. That to me kind of seems to be your forte.
Thank you.
Can you give us the elevator pitch of why there is a balance in there? Why destroy technology doesn't have to destroy the learning process or the home, that it can be used. Why don't you explain it?
Well, I would say it's very simple. It goes back to the basics of everything as a tool. In the day, a wheelbarrow was the latest technology,
Right.
or a bicycle was the latest technology. And anything can be used wrongly, or it can be used out of balance with what your priorities need to be based on just what you should be doing at any given time.
Right, and I think the reason the word destroy came up is because so many people think it destroys creativity. It kills parts of your brain and does all this type of thing. And, maybe I didn't let my kids, play video games or watch much TV when they were very little. But, now, even before COVID, we're homeschoolers, we were using the internet definitely as a tool. And it's just like anything to me that can be used for good or bad, and it's how we're talking right now. It's how we know each other. We've never actually met face to face for real. So I just loved your approach on that. Do you have it? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I wanted to add that there's nothing destructive about play either. I mean, if you look at it that it's play, there are good things about play done right, the right kinds of games. It's not the technology of the game.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, I loved that particular essay of yours. Do you have any that jump out at you as your particular favorites, that if somebody says, hey, tell me which one to read, you suggest it? Just ones that you are pleased with the outcome?
Um, it really would depend on the person I'm talking to. I particularly like the one about getting your children to cheerfully do chores.
Mm.
That I'm very pleased with how that ended up in our lives and how we problem solved that. But other than that, I think more philosophically, the one about the three that untangle morality, religion, and faith, I'm particularly happy with.
Okay, I'll link to those. Yeah, I have not read the one about chores. Again, another must I'm having to get to. Yes, just an aside, we've tried everything with the chores. They really do good work, but we're constantly competing because I have 12-year-old twins and 13-year-old older brother, and they always feel like they're being slighted by the other and doing more. And so I'm riding that rail of, we try to kind of evenly distribute it, but then if one person does 2 seconds more than the other, it can lead to a fight. So we're constantly tweaking the methodology. So I'll have to check that one out. So I met you in libertarian circles.
Yes.
So that would make sense that you discuss economics sometimes. It brings me to your audiobook, Melody's Life Savings. Is that about economics?
Well, no.
Okay.
It's about what happened with her and how she ended up using her money.
Okay. And tell us how we can get the audiobook again. Can you download it straight from your website?
I get a little confused because I've done things different ways and technology is always changing, but it is available on audible.com. I have done a couple of my books available through, I have an account on gumroad.com, but those I think are mostly my Chinese ones at this point, because it depends on whether you have exclusive arrangements with Amazon where you can have your books.
All right, well, I'll poke around. I'll make sure I at least have the Audible one. Well, tell me about economics. We have home economics. We have to, that kind of brings me up to the chores. You try to be fair and equitable, and how you give people the fair share of labor. Sometimes you give money for chores. Sometimes, you buy kids things. Other people just say, hey, it's just part of life. And in this house, you're not getting paid for chores because everybody has to do them. How would you say that economics played a role in raising your children?
Well, if you think of economics in just the broad sense of what's most important to you and time preference, that's something that's a term that is thrown around a lot in the libertarian economic circles. And I think most people are aware of it, but not necessarily in those terms. And just the idea of being able to defer satisfaction in the short term for a greater goal in the long term. And also being able to really evaluate, kind of let the buyer beware. For instance, with the public school system, was I really going to be getting what I wanted versus the long term of putting in the effort with teaching them at home?
Yeah, I agree with that. you could try to fix what the public school gets wrong, taking what you think they get right, and then you're still working extra because you're probably, if your kids are in a public school, working outside of the home anyway. That was actually one of the big things that pushed me over in the beginning too. It seemed not that great of a deal.
Right, right.
Economically and sleep wise, because I
Yeah.
like my sleep, and you have to roll that into the family planning as well.
Uh-huh.
Now what about libertarianism? Would you say, why would you call yourself a libertarian? You used to be the libertarian homeschooler. Are you still? And was it strictly like a money thing, or was it just an overall liberty philosophy?
I did not become aware of what the small L libertarian philosophy was, as far as very specifically like the non-aggression principle and things, until about 10 years ago. But I have to think that it was, the ideas were there, first of all, because I felt free to teach my own children. um, and I always thought why should anybody question my right to do that?
Right.
I tried to be patriotic, but it never worked.
Mm-hmm.
It just always felt gross.
Yes, the modern definition of it, questioning nothing, and you're a person who questions things. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a strange label. Well, what else about it? There's a lot going on these days. You don't have to talk about current events per se, but would you still call yourself a libertarian? I know that some libertarians that I really like are thinking the label's worn out or something else. How do you see that?
I think that in any conversation you have with anybody, you have to have enough of a conversation to come to understand what you mean by what you say, that labels are only a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will use whatever label seems appropriate in the social arena that I am in.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now you have another book called How to Build a Backyard Brick Oven from Scratch. It sounds like a very libertarian thing to be doing. Building brick ovens from scratch. How did you get into this and homesteading? Is it just something you morphed into as you're living in Idaho? Trying to kind of get back to the land. How did you pull this off?
So let me just start by saying I am in no means like a hermit purist, get off the grid kind of homesteader. Both my husband and I like to do and make. And I like to garden, and I like to sew and crochet. And I've learned a lot of cooking. He is actually an excellent cook, much more creative with that. He's also an engineer. And he loves to work with, he sat in front of a desk many, many years. And so getting home and being able to do hands-on projects with cement and fiberglass and different things like that, he had a lot of fun with. So the brick oven in particular was his confluence of cooking and engineering projects like that he started making. And I was already blogging. And so I said, well, we photo document everything.
Right.
And then, can I write about this? And then we decided to put it together in a book. So the project is definitely his. I was just the journalist for that.
Nice. Yeah, that's how, I just have one blog, and I'm always thinking about how I can turn anything into some kind of essay, or at least part of an essay.
Uh-huh.
That's really interesting. And that's how your daily improvisations blog, the brick oven kind of fits more into that. Tell us about that site where it's more creative, less education-ish.
Yeah, it's about gardening, sewing, anything that has to do with the home and animals, and not like pet animals, but I've raised chickens. We've had rabbits in the past. I have goats and my first horse as of 2 years ago. Just that kind of stuff.
So you had never owned a horse before?
I had not.
And you just said, I'm going to get a horse, because it's a lot of work, huh?
It's every girl's dream, right?
Yeah.
In our culture, it's the girl dream in a lot of ways, even though there are cowboys and rodeos. No,
Right.
I did not grow up with horses. I had very minimal exposure to horses. Like once when I was 12, a neighbor said, "Can you feed my horse this week?"
Right.
Um, and I had been on a horse like 3 times in my life in very controlled situations. But I had determined, or I had assumed, I guess, that this was not something that I was going to have in this lifetime, and kind of um, just accepted that it wasn't going to happen. And then when my husband really wanted to move to some property a couple of years ago, and he was looking at some acreage, and he knew I did not want to move from our home where we had raised the kids. And at that point, we'd lived there almost 23 years. But I could see the look in his eye, and he's like, would you consider it? Yeah, I'm really, really interested in moving. And I looked at him, and all of a sudden I said, "Can I have a horse?" And he said, he hardly thought 2 seconds. He said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, done deal."
Wow. That's so fascinating, because there's a few people I know that have wanted horses and then looked into all that it entailed, like my mom. And that was always her dream. And then my dad and her got property, and they never got horses because they just thought, wow, it's a lot of work. Are you loving it? Is there
I
something?
am absolutely loving it. I had some lessons before I bought the horse that I have. Greg said, "I think you should try riding one before we buy one." I said, "Okay, that makes sense." And then a friend who had horses for several years helped me find one. And she was a little green. I had her trained, but she's about 14 years old, so she's a really good age. And then I, again, by the grace of God, ended up with one of my private lessons running into a group of ladies who meet and ride every week during all the months except for like October through December. And so I've been meeting with those gals for about a year, and they are so encouraging, and it's so great to be riding with a group of people. Yeah, I'm absolutely loving it. It is a little scary.
Yeah.
And yeah, there definitely is stuff to learn. Horses are big.
And that's really kind that horse people are accepting of you. You would think sometimes horse people think, oh, this newbie, what does she know? But that's really nice. They probably want everybody to love horses.
They're just a great group of ladies.
Well, that kind of leads me to one of your other endeavors, Fun Fitness After 50. Well, riding horses, really good exercise. What got you into this? I mean, you just have you been active your whole life, and you just wanted to encourage people to keep on keeping on once they got to middle age?
Pretty much. I split off the blogs into that subject when I was pretty close to 50, and I thought, okay, that makes sense. And I've always been active. I discovered several years ago that people telling me to just calm down made me sick.
Mm-hmm.
That I was meant to be active.
Right.
That's I express myself through running and dancing and all of that stuff. So yes, I also, from the time, and I don't know where these ideas came from. I don't take credit for them. I just know that they occurred to me, from the time that I started having kids. I wanted to be a good example of motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted people to look at me having lots of kids and saying, oh, you can be fit, you can be active, you can be in shape. And it's not that I wanted to be a bodybuilder, and I don't think I would win any, modeling contests, but I can go and dance for a couple of hours when 30-year-olds are like out of breath.
Right.
And it's a blast.
Right. That is a wonderful thing to, impart to your children and now your grandchildren. And keeping in shape, you want to be able to play with your young grandchildren. And I didn't start having babies till my late 30s. And if you're not taking care of your body, you can't even get down on the floor and get back up sometimes when you have toddlers. So
Yeah.
yes, it's that's great that you're doing that. And then you have fun learning Chinese because you lived in Taiwan. And I mean, how did this occur? The same kind of way, just I'm doing this, so I may as well blog about it. And is it still going?
Yes, that's probably the blog podcast that I've been most consistent with over the last year, with everything that's been going on, because it was just refreshing on so many levels. I did series on the homesteading blog, Daily Improvisations, about gardening when in the spring, when a lot of people were interested in that on a new level. And I've done off and on the fitness one. And I've been re-recording, like I said, for the Happy Homeschool, and had some technical issues there. But so we started learning Chinese when we lived in Taiwan for just a few months. And I had always wanted to learn a second language, and it had just never, again, quite worked out. So when we got back to the States, I did not want to stop, even though it was really hard. It was not easy, but it's about as far from English as you can get. But I did some research on the internet, and I actually found a tutor who lived in Boise. And she and I have become fast friends, and she works with me on the podcast and the blog, and getting all of the translations and recordings. So all of the recordings of the Chinese, well, I shouldn't say that, because once in a while she encourages me. She goes, Laura, you can do it. You say it once in a while. But for most of the people who are listening, the advantages of hearing a native speaker read the Chinese are just so important.
Yeah, and it's really admirable that you started doing this as an adult. I've just now decided, in my years of homeschooling, that there's no such thing as a math person, right? Everybody can get it. It just takes some people longer than others. But foreign languages, I don't know. I think my brain has just passed that point of being able to let it soak in.
Oh, no.
I know.
It's, with anything, it's interest, opportunity, and with anything, it's just deciding to do it on a regular basis.
Yes. So my kids, we did some Latin, in their early years, and that was pretty good. And that actually helped with their English skills. And
exactly.
I'm pretty good at teaching the English grammar and whatnot, but now they've been taking Russian for over a year. And I started kind of hanging out with them when they were originally doing it. And then I slowly just walked away, and I'm like, now it's time for your Russian lesson, Sonny. And then I'll go clean a toilet or something. Because I got to the point where it was hard, and then I just kind of stopped doing it. So I do need to follow your example and set a better example that, we're I am a lifelong learner. So, but it really is scary. And to take on Mandarin, that's pretty impressive.
Well, my tutor, it's a mix of my desire and determination, but there have been so many times, because with any learning, you hit plateaus, or you hit frustrations, or you hit things in life that make it a little harder. And she learned English from scratch. And she just is always encouraging, learn what you can, do what you can. We don't have to be tested on this.
Right.
I have hopes of becoming more fluent, and the more I do it, the more I see that as a possibility, and I'm going to push ahead with it more. But I can still just enjoy the process.
Yeah, I'll have to check out more of that. My husband and I went to China, and I think it was 2003, before kids, and I learned the basics: bathroom, beer, food, that kind of thing, right? And when I was saying what I thought was it, but I wouldn't get the tone right, and I would say, the toilet's like "Satswa," right? Satswa or something like that. Yeah. So I would say it like the way I said it, trying really hard. They would just look at me funny. They would go, "Toilet?" I'm like, yes, that's where. It's not as easy as baño,
No, it's like I said, it's very different than the English language.
Yeah. Well, that is fascinating. Well, this is my first episode of the new year. How are you feeling about 2021? As as a parent, grandparent, libertarian, Christian. Do you have any predictions for us? Or how
The
are you?
world is going to end someday.
Yeah. Or, you have half the people saying, impending civil war or secession or something, dominoes falling. Other people just think it's just going to keep on keeping on with crazy times for another 100 years. Do you have any insights? I mean, I really have no idea. I have no idea.
I have a few thoughts on it. For starters, when I was a teenager, an older teenager, and just thinking about college, my grandma shared a story with me. She said when she was in college age, she knew a young man who wanted to go to medical school, but there was World War II was starting. There were so many signs the world was going to end. So he decided not to. And he lived to be an old man and never fulfilled that desire, never followed up on that at all. So the advice is always to plan for the future, but live for the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice.
When this whole mess with the current things happened, one of my first thoughts was, I wonder if this is how people felt when World War II started. Like, the world is going up in smoke. This is unprecedented. Everything's going to be destroyed. Bombs are falling everywhere. And again, if you look through history, people have been fighting and exerting tyranny and doing all that. With my last two daughters, we read through a history of Genghis Khan. Can you imagine the people when he was going through the world doing all of that? I mean, stuff happens. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to say where it's going to go, but I have made a decision to not let the chaos of the world rob my happiness and my engagement of life. There definitely been times when I've struggled more as, different things were thrown in our face, and where do I stand on how I'm going to approach this or that. But you can't always live in fear of you shouldn't. It just destroys your own life, and life is just full of mishap and trouble.
Yeah, and I heard somebody say this recently, that like the best revenge is the laughter of our children.
Yes,
and
that's a good. Yeah.
And it's so true. And I had my ups and downs in 2020, but overall, I'm a pretty optimistic person. And I decided to do a bunch of traveling and take my kids to battlefields and go to the beach and, kind of cross a few things off the bucket list. Now, some things we couldn't do because they were closed, but we got a lot done. I mean, my bucket list is pretty long. So that's kind of how I'm going for 2021, is following your advice. But planning is, oh my gosh. I mean, I guess it's like people planning during World War II. Well, I want to do this thing really bad and I can't plan because, there's a war going on. But that's what really gets me down, that planning for almost anything, because I live in North Carolina and it's pretty rough here as far as all the COVID mandates. How is it out in Idaho? Is it kind of hands off?
It depends on where you are. Boise proper, the mayor is ending up being really liberal. The governor has been kind of medium, middle of the road, tyrannical. But out in the rural areas where I am, you hardly ever see a mask. There are businesses open without them, and people are just like, whatever, you guys in the city.
Right. Right. Do you see more people moving out to where you live? You hear about people fleeing the cities and stuff.
There's a crazy exodus coming our way. They're really driving up housing prices and things around here. And I have to feel for them. They are trying to escape hell.
Right. It's just, don't import your crazy philosophies, please.
Most of the people, I think, who are leaving, they have at least a semi-right idea.
Right.
But there's no explaining how some people get in power. I don't agree with the oft quoted idea that tyrants get in power because people do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Tyrants get in power because they're tyrants.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They're meaner than the other guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was reading something that Jeff Dice wrote the other day of the Mises Institute, and how most people in political power are just mediocre intelligence, mediocre personalities, just mediocre. But once they get that power, they feed on it, because in real life they're just really, boring dimwits. So,
I think that is very true assessment.
yes. What else? What do you have on your calendar for your blog, or anything that you have going on that you want to tell people about? And I'll be sure to link to some of the things we discussed.
Was this a question you asked me?
Probably not.
I'm just really, I think I covered it. I'm trying to live life and encourage other people and keep my priorities.
Yes. And
not watch the news too much.
Yes, I know. I haven't been paying attention for a couple of weeks, just trying to take a break. And people are talking about amen, a woman. Do you happen to know what this is?
I heard about that, yeah.
I had no idea. I'm like, who? I just assumed it was some, crazy feminist, priestess who had said it. And it's like, no, some guy said it before, the opening congressional prayer or whatever. I'm like, great. I could have lived life never knowing about that.
How to prove you're an idiot in one easy step.
Yes, exactly. Well, anyway, I'm sure big things are going to be happening with you, and you're just going to let them unfold naturally like you always do. And I look forward to following you more. And, maybe next time you do something super cool that you want to tell the world about, I would love to have you on again. And I thank you so much. And it took us a while to get this going, but I think it was worth the wait.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Bye-bye.
Bye.